Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have a really interesting discussion today because we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what happens sometimes with entrepreneurs. But the cool thing is we can always learn from that. And so please join me in welcoming Gregory Vetter to our program today. Welcome, Greg. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this because we're going to have so much to talk about. So Gregory Vetter is a transformative figure who has guided various enterprises, including Tessemae's All Natural, Alta Fresh Foods, and Homegrown brands as their founder and CEO. His mission, simply put, is to galvanize the leaders of tomorrow. As a preeminent thinker on issues ranging from leadership, change management to innovation, Greg is a recognized expert and frequent speaker on a host of related topics. He is also the author of Undressed, the unfiltered story of my failed American dream and how it led to success. And you got to look at the book just because the cover is worth it just for that, right? Greg is passionate about empowering tomorrow's leaders and helping them raise the bar of their performance and manage success. He has guided countless entrepreneurs as they navigate the inevitable perils that emerge on one's journey. The book is a proven guide for those who seek to surmount challenges, whether they be business-oriented or, conversely, those that are inherent in everyday life. So again, Greg, welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I always ask my guests, and I know it's very cliche, but I think people really enjoy knowing how it is that you got to where you are today. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I was selling insurance over top of a bodega looking over a cemetery. And I thought to myself, I don't know if this is the path that's going to get me to the dreams and goals that I have. And so every day I would go home at lunch and I would turn all the lights off in my bedroom and I would stand on my head with a journal next to me, waiting for an epiphany. And one never came, but I would go downstairs. I'd make myself a big salad with protein on it. And I'd go back to work and I would cold call all day long. And so one day, this 2-liter bottle of salad dressing that my mom had made for me was missing.
Oh, no.
And so I called my wife. I'm like, hey, did you take the salad dressing to work? She goes, no, I didn't take a 2-liter bottle of salad dressing. And I'm like, well, I can't find it anywhere. She goes, maybe someone came in our house and took it. I go, no one broke into our
salad dressing
and stole salad dressing. And she goes, I don't know what to tell you, Greg. So to prove her wrong, I started calling my neighbors. And it turned out that a guy did break into my house and take it.
Oh, no.
And so I thought to myself, what kind of man steals another man's salad dressing?
Right.
And then I thought, what kind of salad dressing is good enough where somebody would steal it?
True.
So I call my wife and I go, hey, so-and-so did actually come in and take it. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to start a salad dressing company.
And she wondered what you had been doing.
Well, and, surprisingly, she goes, that's the greatest idea I've ever heard. This is going to
love it.
I have a really weird feeling. And so that took me on one of the wildest entrepreneurial stories and journeys of all time. And so over the course of the next 15 years, I built the #1 organic salad dressing brand in the country. And then it ended up all crumbling down in a fiery blaze. And through my reflections of that experience, I wrote a book,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm on a book tour, and I'm doing all that fun, wonderful stuff. And I've built a bunch of other businesses since then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is how I am currently sitting here talking to you
Mm-hmm.
today.
I love it. And the book, which again is Undressed, the unfiltered story of my failed American dream and how it led to success, it really is a very detailed journey from start to finish of the business. And so it for anyone who's thinking about starting a business or actually is running a business, it's a very good resource because there are so many things in it about what you learned along the way.
It I wrote it because it was the book that I wish I had read
Mm.
prior to
Mhm.
launching the business.
Mhm.
It's the book I needed to read in the middle of it when things got
Mhm.
really hard.
Mhm.
And then it's the book I was desperately searching for towards the end
Mhm.
when everything was crumbling down
Mhm.
around me.
Mhm.
And so I structured it in an unfiltered, radically transparent way,
Mhm.
and then also put these field guide learning
Mhm.
lessons at the end of every
Mhm.
chapter, because each chapter in each phase of the journey, I learned something different that I
Mhm.
didn't know, because every entrepreneur, every business person
Mhm.
is just getting beat up every day, but in a
Mhm.
different way that they've
Mhm.
never experienced before.
Right. Right.
History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
Mhm.
And so, after 15 years, I had quite the tale of
Mhm.
rhymes that I could help other
Mhm.
entrepreneurs and CEOs
Mhm.
learn from. And that was really the impetus behind why I decided
Mhm.
to write the book.
Right. And it is the story of Tessemae, and how it did become a wonderful success, and then poof,
Yeah.
and you mentioned fiery. I mean, literally, you burned stuff, right?
Right, right.
And so I would, as I was going through this, one of my thoughts was, it must have been very cathartic to kind of get that story out there. Almost, okay, you hope it helps somebody, but it was good for you to write it.
I didn't actually think it was going to turn into a book.
Mm-hmm.
It was more me writing down the story.
Mm-hmm.
If my kids ever wanted to
Mm-hmm.
understand what I had done from
Mm-hmm.
age 25
Mm-hmm.
to 40. And then I actually gave a portion of it to my performance coach,
Okay.
because he was asking me a bunch of questions about, well, what happened at this stage and
Mm-hmm.
what happened at this
Mm-hmm.
stage. And so I'm like, hey, man, I put the whole thing down. If you ever
Mm-hmm.
need any context
Mm-hmm.
about what I have
Mm-hmm.
done, this is it.
Right.
And so he calls me and he goes, are these stories real? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, you have to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't want to write a book. Why would
Right.
I want to write a book about my greatest failure
Right.
and
Ick.
everything that I did wrong
Mm-hmm.
for 15 years? Who the
Right.
hell would want to do that?
Right. Yeah.
And he goes, I just think you have a really interesting way of
Mm-hmm.
telling the truth
Mm-hmm.
in a way where everybody can relate and then they can
Mm-hmm.
learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do it while the wounds are fresh,
Mm-hmm.
before you try and romanticize
Mm-hmm.
what actually went
Right.
down, I
Mm-hmm.
really think that that could be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, I took the story, I then kind of turned it into more of a book format,
Mm-hmm.
found a great editor. She helped me make it, she toned it down, if you can believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that's read the book is
Mm-hmm.
like, that's toned down.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then here we are. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
book it's doing great,
Mm-hmm.
and I get notes every single
Mm-hmm.
day of people thanking me
Mm-hmm.
for writing it and how it
Mm-hmm.
really helped them. So that part is cool,
Mm-hmm.
because I think leadership comes down to leading by example
Mm-hmm.
and leaving things better than when you found
Mm-hmm.
them. And I think this book does that for
Mm-hmm.
me in some way, shape, or
Mm-hmm.
form.
Right. Well, and it shows people that they're not alone. Now we hope that nobody's business crashes quite like yours did,
Right.
but it is something where you mentioned, you wish you had it when you were in the middle of what you were going through. And I think that is something that is, we hear so frequently is we didn't know what to do. We didn't know who to turn to because, hey, we don't want to admit we're having issues. And you certainly can't be, telling your team we got issues. Now maybe you should be, right? Because they might have solutions. Um, but yeah, and more than anything, like I said, I think it's just to show people you're not alone. Every business has its ups and downs.
Well, and I think for me, when I was young and I was thinking about getting into the entrepreneurial scene,
Mm-hmm.
I read a bunch of books and you're like, okay, I can deal with
Mm-hmm.
something like
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, yeah, that's a little chaotic, but that's
Right.
not big
Mm-hmm.
of a deal. And then you get into it for
Mm-hmm.
real and you're like, this is hard.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This is not
Mm-hmm.
easy.
Mm-hmm.
People are ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is on the line every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Why doesn't anybody talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
Why are
Right.
we only
Mm-hmm.
talking about, the kid genius that becomes a billionaire at 24 years old and
Mm-hmm.
changes the world? Like, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I was that person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a regular guy that wanted to change his stars
Mm-hmm.
through business,
Mm-hmm.
had no money, had no background in business, food
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing, salad dressing, nothing. And it's like, how do you take an idea
Mm-hmm.
and turn it into something of
Mm-hmm.
substance? Well, it's not
Mm-hmm.
easy.
Right.
And there's not much that's
Mm-hmm.
going to prepare you for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that part has been really wonderful as I'm
Mm-hmm.
on the speaking
Mm-hmm.
circuit and I'm talking to people that are in it or
Mm-hmm.
thinking about getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful and rewarding time for
Right.
sure.
Right. And we talk on this program a lot about how do you start a business, right? And I'm a huge proponent of you got to start it right at the start because it's really hard to play catch up.
Mhm.
And I was very fortunate when I started my company over 20 years ago. I had some really good advisors. And they said things like, it's one of two things. It's a hobby or it's a business. And we hear that and we laugh about it, right? But that's really what it comes down to. Is it a business or is it something you do for fun? Now, it should always be fun. There are things that aren't going to be fun, though, right? When you're running a business, it's not always fun. And there are times where it's like, I don't want to be here. But yeah, how are you treating? And the things, just as simple as, okay, you got to get a business license or whatever it is that you're doing, and insurance, right? And even just like I am a service provider. I provide services. I don't provide any products. I still have insurance in case somebody decides I've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And I have, and my company is incorporated. And one of the things that I found very interesting, that one person told me, she said, set up a bank account in a totally different bank from your personal stuff.
Yeah.
She said, because it makes it very hard to intermingle funds. Now, of course, when we're starting out, it comes from our money, right? But your CPA will really love you when you've got these two separate entities, and so just things like that. But we don't think about the hard stuff. And again, I think it's because people don't talk about it. And so that's what I liked about your book was you go into some of the really ugly details about some of the things you did. And of course, then when you toss in the fact that you were dealing with a food product, there was just so much there that somebody has to deal with.
Yeah, we did the hardest outside of launching a produce business, which
Mm-hmm.
I also have, which
Mm-hmm.
is the hardest business you
Mm-hmm.
can.
Right.
Refrigerated,
Mm-hmm.
perishable
Mm-hmm.
salad dressing, which is a traditionally slow moving
Mm-hmm.
product
Right.
in a glass container
Mm-hmm.
in refrigerated logistics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like the
Right.
hardest,
You picked the hardest thing to
dumbest,
do.
dumbest thing. You know, I tell people if I can make salad
Mm-hmm.
dressing cool
Mm-hmm.
and work,
Mm-hmm.
I can do anything
Mm-hmm.
because
Right.
it is the hardest,
Mm-hmm.
dumbest thing
Mm-hmm.
you could ever do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it is one of those things where you don't think about a lot of it in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. And maybe some people do, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
a
But
Harvard
and maybe it's
MBA
good that you
somewhere
didn't
that,
know or you never would have
right.
started, right?
Well, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm probably so stubborn I still would have,
Mhm.
because I would be like, well, no, I can
Mhm.
totally make this happen.
Mhm. That's
Um,
okay. 200 pages. I can fill out those
I'll
forms.
fly through that,
Mhm.
no biggie. But yeah, very difficult.
Mhm.
And just a lot. I wanted the book to be kind of a
Mhm.
pressure test for
Mhm.
people.
Right.
Read it.
Mhm.
It's not for you to not move forward.
Mhm.
It's for you to take a moment
Mhm.
and start asking yourself questions about,
Mhm.
are you prepared?
Mhm. Right.
Have you thought through this?
Mhm.
Do you care about this idea
Mhm.
enough
Mhm.
to potentially go
Right.
through what I went
Mhm.
through?
Mhm.
Are you willing to sacrifice everything that you are
Mhm.
to this idea?
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, if the answer is yes, wonderful.
Right. Right.
But if the answer is
Mhm.
no, move
Mhm.
on to the nenext
Mhm.
idea until you are
Mhm.
prepared to
Right.
potentially go
Mhm.
through that
Mhm.
level of nonsense,
Mhm.
because it'll get hard
Mhm. Right.
once you reach a certain
Mhm.
level.
Mhm. And I think that's probably one of the biggest misnomers, maybe is the way to put it. I think people think, well, it's easy. But there's a reason why so many small businesses fail. There's lots of reasons why, but I think one of the biggest things is people were like, whoa, this is way harder than I ever thought it would be. And then, of course, there comes the fact that you had a passion, right? Your passion was this salad dressing. Well, then you had to deal with all the other stuff that came with it. And a lot of people are like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to deal with hiring and firing and payroll and getting funding and, all of that. I just want to make my salad dressing. Okay, then that goes back to a hobby. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Well, and for me, I had no passion in salad dressing at all, honestly.
Except it was your mom's recipe.
Yeah, well, that just made the story great,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think. But your example of hobby versus a
Mm-hmm.
business is spot on,
Mm-hmm.
because so many people I talk to,
Mm-hmm.
they have a hobby
Mm-hmm.
and they follow this
Mm-hmm.
advice of like, turn your
Mm-hmm.
passion into a business.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, that's not true.
Right.
It, yeah, you can turn your passion
Mm-hmm.
into a business if there is a business there.
Right. Yeah. That's the other. Do people even want to
Right.
buy whatever it is? Mm-hmm.
And then,
Mm-hmm.
do you still like this thing
Mm-hmm.
when it becomes a business?
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I played lacrosse in college and
Mm-hmm.
professionally, and me and my brothers started like a little lacrosse business
Mm-hmm.
right out of college. And we go,
Right.
we can make a lot of money.
Yeah. It's fun.
It's
Mm-hmm.
fun. We're good at it. We're
Mm-hmm.
experts. We can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute we got into it, I go, I hate this. I
What do you
like,
mean I have to rent space and
yeah,
have
I'm like,
liability
and like
insurance?
you're dealing with parents that don't want to hear the
Yes.
truth,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want to do the work, and they
Mm-hmm.
just want the results. And
Mm-hmm.
you're like, whoa, 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 whoa,
Mm-hmm.
whoa.
Mm-hmm.
I am not interested in this
Mm-hmm.
business
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an interesting example. And because I had that
Mm-hmm.
experience of a hobby
Mm-hmm.
into a business and not liking it,
Mm-hmm.
when the salad dressing presented itself, I was like, well, this can be a business,
Mm-hmm.
and I can basically force myself into being
Mm-hmm.
passionate
Mm-hmm.
about it
Right.
because it has the ability
Mm-hmm.
to scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so often, well, I love fill in the blank.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. I
Mm-hmm.
love a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean it has the capacity
Mm-hmm.
to scale.
Right.
And
Right.
so, you know, unless you want to be
Mhm.
sitting at farmers markets every single day
Mhm.
for the rest of your life,
Mhm.
find a
Mhm.
new thing to
Mhm.
have a business.
Right, right. And I love that you mentioned scale because we do have to, now there are some people who do, a limited number of whatever it is, and they're perfectly happy with that. But for an ongoing business, you need to sell more and sell more and sell more. And then whatever that production is, if it's a product, that's pretty big. If it's a service, it is easier, because you don't have something physical in many cases that you're doing. But you have to be able to fulfill that demand. I have my own PR firm, and I had a client who came to me one time, and she had written a book, and I've talked about this on the program before. Her goal, now this was a great goal, but this will show you it was long enough ago. She wanted to be Oprah's book of the month,
Yeah.
right? But she wanted to skip everything in between. She just wanted me to get her on Oprah, and I was good, but I wasn't that good. um but I told her, I said, okay, that's great to have that goal, especially as an author. And I said, and this was before Amazon and print on demand, so you had to physically have the books. In her case, she had them in her garage, right? And I said, if you are featured on, as Oprah's book of the month, can you fulfill the immediate demand of, say, 30,000 books or more? And she looked at me and went, oh. And I said, and you can't tell people, oh, I'll get them to you at some point.
Right. In 8 weeks.
Yeah, and so, or like I had a client one time, hairdresser, great people, I love these, and we ran a campaign for them, and it was pretty ambitious. It was, everybody gets half off, yada yada yada, and I told them the same thing. I said, can you fulfill that demand? And they looked at me, and I said, if 5 people call, can you do that? Well, yes. If 50 people call, can you do? And they said, well, no. I said, so you're going to tell them, sorry, we're going to give you an appointment in 4 weeks. Well, hello, I'm a lady. I can't wait 4 weeks to get my hair done. So I'm going to go to somebody else. And so we restructured what we were doing to be able to fulfill whatever demand would come in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and for us, our whole thing was scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so we built it, our sales strategy, our marketing
Mm-hmm.
strategy, everything we did
Mm-hmm.
was to try and be a national brand.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, even with those goals and that
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
we still kind of grew beyond our wildest dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is also just kind of, it's interesting. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
even if you take into account,
Mm-hmm.
if 30,000 stores say, yes, tomorrow, can you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can. But what if they order 5 times more than you've ever
Right.
thought was possible?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then you start getting into these bizarre
Mm-hmm.
scenario planning situations where, you can never kind of be totally accurate. So
Mm-hmm.
you just have to be within reasonable
Mm-hmm.
spitting
Right.
distance.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's kind of an art
Mm-hmm.
form to figure out.
Right. Well, and it's one of those, cart before the horse type of things. You know, do you have that supply available, which may or may not go, right? And or how fast can you ramp up? And because if you're dealing with somebody who wants a lot, they don't want to wait. Now they'll, obviously, if you are a new business, things like that, they know, okay, you're going to have to ramp up production. But it can also be, just providing a service. If somebody, you and I are both speakers, if somebody came and said, I need you to do a presentation for my 10,000 employees and I need it on Monday, could we do that? Now, of course, what's going to happen is we'll probably say, oh, sure. Right. Because we don't want to lose that business. But, are we really able to give a good quality product?
As long as they don't need print copies, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I tell people I can wing an awful lot, right? But yeah, it's, but that has to be part of the business plan. And so maybe, and so you don't shoot for Oprah, you shoot for your local market first. Now, spoiler alert, and I don't know how this worked out on our schedule. The guest for the program after you, so the next program also founded a food related company. It's actually a coffee business. And he started it with his then 6-year old daughter. And she's now 10 and she's like the CEO. And this is a very cool story. But yeah, same thing. This is great, but are we ready for the next steps?
Yeah.
And there's so many things that are part of those next steps. Not just, hey, can we do the product? And especially in your case, okay, it's a refrigerated product. Do you have the trucks? Which I'm assuming it went on trucks because that, and so do you have the trucks to be able to ship it? Do you have the drivers to be able to, and this is not Uber, and all of those various things.
Yeah, I was giving a speech and a young guy has a business and he's importing stuff and the price points aren't right. And so I just start talking about logistics and whatnot. And he's like, yeah, we're FedEx box, shipping 25-pound boxes of something. And I'm like,
and how much does that cost?
Yeah, I'm like, you could buy an airplane after a year if you were spending that much money on a consistent basis. But the thought process of easy and then thinking small, it comes down to the inexperienced side of, okay, well, how do I do this at scale? Which then takes you into the next phase of, am I willing to take that risk and that financial commitment for the scale and risk? And so that is the workflow process that then either takes you to success or paralyzes you because you start analyzing this to the point where there is no clarity because every answer is a possibility.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that is the confusing part is, and it's fun, in the marketing terms, we have BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, right? And some of those are so big and so hairy that we just cannot achieve them. But it's nice to still have those, but you need all that in between stuff to kind of get you there. There's I can't even think of any products that were an overnight sensation. There's something that has always come before that. And I think, yeah, we want to be successful, but like in entertainment terms, right? It's they pay their dues. We kind of have to do that to some degree. Now, I'm not saying you got to start at farmers market, that you might be able to ramp up more than that. But yeah, think about all of those things. And that's what I love about your book is, as you said, you've got all that in there. Things that somebody who's going, ooh, this sounds like fun, might not realize they've got to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there is this need for taking the steps when everybody wants to take an elevator.
Right. And an express elevator at that, right?
Well, it's one of those things where the steps, you slowly get acclimated to the altitude, right? And you're getting a little tired and you're changing your pace and you're rethinking how far you want to go because maybe you're 25 stories up already. And you had a goal of getting to the 1000th floor. And you're like, I don't know if I'm prepared for that level of climb.
And maybe you don't want to do it.
Well, you think you do until you're on the 50th floor.
Right.
And you still got 950 floors to go.
Right.
And you're like, okay, versus, and I see this happen so often, you get on the express elevator, you get to the top out of nowhere, you're not prepared, not acclimated, you're not seasoned, and you get there and you start making decisions that people that were on the second floor would be making.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing you know, it
Mm-hmm.
all comes crumbling
Mm-hmm.
down around you because you just grew too quickly. You weren't seasoned, you didn't take the steps, and you weren't physically, mentally, or spiritually prepared
Mm-hmm.
for that level of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And that is another thing that I see on the speaking circuit where you'll have some people that go, yeah, I mean, I could do this
Mm-hmm.
like today at this level.
Mm-hmm.
Intellectually, you may think that you
Right. Mm-hmm.
like you, I'm sure you can read some case studies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you can do all that stuff. But when you sit at that desk
Mm-hmm.
and payrolls due,
Mm-hmm.
and your largest retailer hasn't paid you,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to call 50 people
Mm-hmm.
and let them know that their paychecks aren't coming in.
Right. Or you're going to get it, but don't cash it.
Right. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not ready for that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And most people aren't. And I don't wish that on anybody.
Right.
Obviously. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's
But it
anxiety.
happens.
Yeah, it happens all the
Yeah.
time.
Oh yeah. And it's it's not that anybody did anything wrong. And I think that's the thing too, is things just happen. I mean, COVID, is probably one of the, but yeah, I mean, there are just things where, like, as you said, maybe your biggest vendor is, just slightly off on their payment because all these various things, and
Or
it
because of a
snowballs.
banking holiday or
Right.
something,
Yeah.
and
You
it's
forgot
like,
that Juneteenth, the bank was closed,
right.
right?
And it's like payrolls due that day and you
Mhm.
didn't do it. And now you're like, oh man.
Right.
Now, however many
Mhm.
years into it I am now, I'm
Mhm.
it's water off a duck's
Mhm.
back.
Right.
It'll hit
Mhm.
on Monday.
Mhm.
Sorry,
Yeah.
but
And
it's
well, and the thing is to communicate, right? To tell
yeah.
people, here's what's going on. But and people, they're gonna roll with it. If you tell them, oh my gosh, I'm really sorry, we forgot that it was a holiday,
Yep.
cash your check tomorrow.
Yep.
And so, but and like you said, things happen. I mean, I remember years ago, I was the admin assistant of a small company, and we didn't do our payroll, it was sent out, and the payroll company made an error.
Yep.
They added a couple zeros to somebody's check.
Oh no.
Now he was quite happy, but
Yeah.
but he comes to me and he said there's something really wrong. And of course it overdrew our account.
Yep.
Even though he immediately, said, hey, but then of course what happened was that screwed up everybody's taxes,
Yep.
all sorts of stuff. And it was just something as simple as somebody might have laid a finger on the key when they shouldn't have. But yeah, things happen. But it's just a matter of, as I said, communicating and telling folks, here's what's going on.
100%. And again, I think it's a preparation process. And the book is so radically transparent for all of those reasons. Because again, when you're dealing with stuff like that, I remember we had a banking issue and we weren't going to make payroll. And I thought I had a mentor. And I call him, I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do. We didn't get paid from these people. Payroll's going out tomorrow. This is happening. I don't know which way to think about this. And he just goes, yeah, man, that never happened to me. I can't help you at all.
Oh, no.
And I was like, you've never dealt with something like this ever?
Right. Even close, right?
Right. Like you've never had any hardship. I'm like, I don't know if I should be asking you advice if
on
you've
anything.
never dealt with any form of adversity ever. And I figured it out and everything was fine. But having a resource where you can go and say, I'm in a pickle. I need counsel. I need advice. I don't even know how to frame this problem to solve it because I'm so stressed I can't think straight. That's kind of an interesting thing that not a lot of people talk about. I'm in YPO, which is the Young Presidents Organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a peer-to-peer group, which is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting because there's no, some executive leadership groups,
Mm-hmm.
they've got a main person that,
Mm-hmm.
you're a disciple of or whatever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But this is a peer-to-peer group, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a really wonderful
Mm-hmm.
resource to throw
Mm-hmm.
random extreme
Right.
problems,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's got
Mm-hmm.
some version of a
Mm-hmm.
solution
Right.
to help you think
Mm-hmm.
through that.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had gotten into
Mm-hmm.
something like that much earlier on
Mm-hmm.
in my journey. I was in a group where there was like one guy that gave his 2 cents and
Mm-hmm.
with you, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And his advice and counsel and insights were limited.
Right.
And so I highly
Mm-hmm.
recommend any founder,
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, business person getting in
Mm-hmm.
some type of leadership situation
Right.
like that, where
Mm-hmm.
you have a trusted,
Mm-hmm.
confidential group of people
Mm-hmm.
where you can just throw
Mm-hmm.
problems
Mm-hmm.
or
Right.
insights or questions
Mm-hmm.
to help you get a
Mm-hmm.
better understanding
Mm-hmm.
of where you're going and what you
Mm-hmm.
should be doing.
Right. And I'm part of C-Suite Network. This program is part of C-Suite Network, and that exists there. But the thing about what you're talking about is because of technology, now it's much easier, right? You might not want to be talking with somebody in your area,
Yeah.
depending on what you do. So, okay, you're going to connect with somebody 1,000 miles away.
Right.
And obviously there are groups that you can't have this, two people from the same industry. I mean, all sorts of things like that. And so check those out. But that tends to be one of the things I hear the most is I feel alone and I feel like there's nobody I can talk to.
Yeah.
And anymore, that's just an excuse, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, now you can talk to a freaking AI bot
Right. Oh yeah. I
to
mean,
get,
Chat GPT and I are good buddies, right?
and it is interesting. It misses some of the creativity and like random
Mm-hmm.
solutions
Mm-hmm.
that are beyond its scope.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But to cut through the
Mm-hmm.
noise
Mm-hmm.
and to take a very complex
Mm-hmm.
problem and boil it down
Mm-hmm.
to one or two
Mm-hmm.
sentences, it does a wonderful job.
Right. Right. Yeah. I am working on a project to help executives who are dealing with cancer. And so, developing all the materials with that, I'm working with Chat GPT, and I asked it the question somewhere along the lines of, what do you think we've been doing so far, and where should we go forward? Stuff that you would ask a real person, right? And it came back, and I thought this was the funniest thing in the world. It said, "You are focusing on developing things that are not yet needed when you should be focusing on other priorities." And it was like, oh, I just got smacked by Chat GPT. And of course, it was right. I was developing all of these great resources
Yeah.
that have no one has asked for yet.
Yeah.
And now, did it give me solutions? No, but I didn't ask. I mean, I didn't go any further. But yeah, start with Chat GPT, but
Yeah.
also you can say, hey, Chat GPT, I'm looking for an organization that can be a peer-to-peer type of thing, and it's going to come up with things for you. So AI is definitely helping in a lot of those realms.
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's definitely a topic of
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Right.
Where everybody's interested of how can they apply
Mm-hmm.
it to their
Mm-hmm.
business to be more
Mm-hmm.
productive, to grow. So we'll see what
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Right. Right. So, I mentioned the good, the bad, the ugly with Tessemae, which is gone. I mean, that's the sad thing. So, what was the best part about Tessemae?
Well, I think it gave me the American dream. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I lived the American dream
Mm-hmm.
for 15 years. And that part, and it also gave me the reality of what the American dream actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought it was something very different when I started versus how
Mm-hmm.
it ended.
Mm-hmm.
And so just being able to take something as dumb as salad dressing
Mhm.
and build it into a national brand
Mhm.
and start manufacturing plants and hire people,
Mhm.
change the way
Mhm.
food is made and invent clean manufacturing, all of that was, an
Mhm.
experience for multiple
Mhm.
lifetimes.
Right.
And so I think all of that for me was really wonderful because
Mhm.
it set the stage for everything that
Mhm.
I'm doing now. So
Mhm.
now we have a produce business, we have a manufacturing business,
Mhm.
we have an alcohol business, we have
Mhm.
a brand accelerator, we have all
You
this.
have portable toilets.
I got portable toilets. I've got wipes now
Mhm.
online of the
Mhm.
same brand,
Mhm.
Tushies. And but the interesting part is everything that you do,
Mhm.
once you figure out how to create a
Mhm.
brand, how to manufacture
Mhm.
something, and how to distribute something,
Mhm.
it's all the same.
Right. Oh yeah. Marketing is marketing, distribution is distribution, all of those things.
And so
Mhm.
that part was really
Mhm.
interesting. And I'll tie it back to the book because
Mhm.
obviously, like making a beverage
Mhm.
and putting it in a container,
Mhm.
it's exactly the same.
Mhm. Right.
But I thought the book part was interesting because it's the same workflow process
Mhm.
of developing a new product,
Mhm.
right? Like there's
Right. You've got an idea.
right
Mhm.
there,
Mhm.
you got an idea, there's copy, there's
Mhm.
printers, there's
Are people going to
manufacturers,
buy it?
right? Is it good
Mhm.
enough? How are
Mhm.
you going to distribute it? How are you
Mhm.
going to market it? How are you going to
Mhm.
brand it? And so again, I was very surprised to see the playbook that was developed
Mhm.
in building a salad dressing brand, how it could be applied
Mhm.
to so many different
Mhm.
industries and so many different
Right.
products
Mhm.
that continue
Mhm.
to allow me to grow
Mhm.
into, the person that I am today.
Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah. And uh, we have to have had setbacks in order to go forward. I saw something from someone that said, you know, if you only have white, you don't know what black is,
Yeah.
right? And so we need those things. But it does lead me to the question, okay, we've been saying Tessemae is no longer. So, and we want people to buy the book. But what happened?
So we grew,
Mm-hmm.
we navigated COVID
Mm-hmm.
unbelievably well.
Mm-hmm. Which that would have been tricky in among in itself, just
Well, it
because of
was.
what you were doing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we owned our own manufacturing
Mm-hmm.
plants. We had our own employees.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we did a wonderful job with that. The
Mm-hmm.
supply chain crisis that then happened because of the Ukraine-Russia war
Mm-hmm.
really started throwing a kink into everybody's
Mm-hmm.
plans globally as it applied to packaged food
Mm-hmm.
products because of
Mm-hmm.
sunflower oil.
Ah,
We used organic expeller pressed sunflower oil, which
okay.
is basically the equivalent of like cold pressed olive oil.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like 90% of the world's sunflower oil comes out of Russia and Ukraine.
Oh, oh.
And so you had this immediate
Mm-hmm.
shortage.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at a label,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of salty snacks use
Mm-hmm.
organic expeller pressed sunflower
Mm-hmm.
oil. A lot of salad
Mm-hmm.
dressings use it. And so the next thing you know, it's just chaos.
Mm-hmm.
We navigated that pretty
Mm-hmm.
well too. But then what happened was like COVID to the supply chain crisis,
Mm-hmm.
all of our investors are like, we got to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
This is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We are living in uncertain times. We need to sell this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people thought we should sell it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people thought we should just raise money.
Mm-hmm.
Some people thought we should do some version of the two. And the groups basically started fighting each other.
Ah,
And so the next thing I know, we're in three different investor lawsuits, and they're
yikes.
all
Mm-hmm.
positioning to take over the business so that their strategy becomes the one that we
Right.
use.
I know better.
And
Mm-hmm.
now we're spending
Mm-hmm.
$350,000 a month in lawyers the entire executive team is distracted
Mhm.
with talking to lawyers
Mhm.
and supply chain issues. And so we tried to bring everybody to the negotiation table to just find a resolution that worked
Mhm.
for everybody, and nobody would play ball.
Mhm.
And so then we had to restructure the
Mhm.
business. That didn't go
Mhm.
well. And the next thing you know, I'm sitting in a conference room handing away this business that was valued at over
Mhm.
$300 million for pennies.
Mhm.
And it was surreal.
Mhm.
I mean, it was one of these things where sales were still going great.
Mhm.
Customer base was loyal. Retailers were great.
Mhm.
And it was, we were dying from the
Mhm.
inside out.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's one of those things where you think, with greed being the motive, we can all align
Right. We're
um,
still this is a good
some
thing,
very
folks. Mhm.
degree of
Mhm.
greed, and pigs get fat, hogs get
Mhm.
slaughtered, and
Mhm.
people just took it to a place where it couldn't
Mhm.
survive anymore. So it was very, very
Mhm.
frustrating. Um, a lot of lessons learned,
Mhm.
a complete reframing of my understanding of human behavior
Mhm.
and what people are capable of.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's how it ended.
Yeah. And you hate that you had to learn the lessons that way, but it sets you up then to deal with that in the future. And you had employment issues, you had all sorts of, you had people sabotaging, I mean, all sorts of things. And while you hated for that to happen, you did learn from it. And I think that's the thing that people need to recognize is, yeah, it sucked. It really, and betrayals, all of those various things. But you picked yourself up and you went, okay, I'm going to go do these other businesses. So, we mentioned them and you've mentioned them, but there's Alta Fresh Foods, there's Homegrown brands. I love that everything you do is very natural, oriented. But tell us a little bit more about, you didn't go, okay, I'm just going to hide my head in the sand. You went, okay, next.
Uh, um, I watched a documentary on Steve Jobs, and they were interviewing Ross Perot.
Mm,
And after Steve Jobs got kicked out of Apple the first
mhm,
time, he called Ross Perot to
mhm,
fund his next venture,
mhm,
I think the next day.
mhm.
And Ross Perot was giving an interview, and he goes, I didn't even know what this guy was talking about. But he goes, the fact that this dude
Mhm,
called me the next day,
mhm.
whereas everybody else in the world would have been hiding in their
Right.
basement,
Yes, licking those wounds and going, "Oh,
crying
poor
themselves
me."
to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
goes, I didn't care what this dude
Mm-hmm.
was going to make. I
Mm-hmm.
was going to I was going to be a part of it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what that taught me in that moment, I
Mm-hmm.
watched it years
Mm-hmm.
ago, was your failures are your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else actually cares.
Right.
And so it's not even, and my greatest fear was the fear of failure,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not failure you're scared of.
Mm-hmm.
It's the shame that
Mm.
comes from failure.
Right. Right. Oh
And,
my gosh, you had a business that failed.
right. And
Right.
that's a you
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because,
And
like you said, most people don't care.
they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably don't even know that you failed
Mm-hmm.
because
Right.
everybody's dealing with their own stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And so for me, yes, there was a couple days
Mm-hmm.
where I was getting bitter and
Mm-hmm.
I was very angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I did just kind of go, this is my problem.
Mm-hmm.
No one else cares. My
Mm-hmm.
kids don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They're smiling. They still love me. They all have
Mm-hmm.
their health. My wife still loves me.
Mm-hmm.
I have my health. She
Right.
health. I'm like, I need to do and practice what I
Mm-hmm.
preach.
Mm-hmm.
I need to lead by
Mm-hmm.
example. I need to leave this place
Mm-hmm.
better than when I found it.
Mm-hmm.
that means I need to get up and I need to go do something
Mm-hmm.
immediately
Mm-hmm.
because action creates more action.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That turns into momentum.
Mm-hmm.
More momentum turns into a life
Mm-hmm.
force, and that can't be
Mm-hmm.
stopped. And so I think, yes, everybody wants to sit there and lick their wounds.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Crying about it doesn't help it.
Right.
We're not saying you can't cry about it.
Mm-hmm.
We're just saying,
Right. It meant a lot to you. You should be, thinking, oh,
yeah.
bummer.
But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
shit
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Right, right. And as we said, learn from it. I mean, that is the big thing. And unfortunately, sometimes mistakes get repeated. We don't, sometimes we got to get smacked around a couple of times before it's like, oh, don't do that. But yeah, it's about picking yourself up and dusting yourself off. And you did that.
Well, that's all you can do.
Mhm. Right, right. So it does make me curious. What is next? What's on your forecast of here's what I want to do?
Well, we're in the middle of launching a bunch of different brands right now. We're
Okay.
launching a ready to drink vodka beverage
Hmm.
called Quenchers.
Okay.
So we're launching that
Mm-hmm.
in some NFL
Mm-hmm.
stadiums right now. So that's cool. We're launching an avocado oil brand. That's
Mm-hmm.
fun. We're growing all these different companies that we
Mm-hmm.
have. But a lot of what I'm doing is I'm writing another book. I'm doing a lot
Mm-hmm.
of leadership retreats
Mm-hmm.
at my farm. I'm doing a lot of mentoring
Mm-hmm.
and counsel and advice for entrepreneurs and
Mm-hmm.
CEOs and I just call them dreamers because
Mm-hmm.
I think so much of what I did is less about business and it's
Mm-hmm.
more just about
Mm-hmm.
having the courage to go after your
Mm-hmm.
dream. Um, and so that's what I see happening
Mm-hmm.
more of in the future is
Mm-hmm.
just more of that stuff that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you say have the courage to go forward because that is the it like we were saying, we think people are going to think less of us, they're going to think we're failed, they don't care.
Okay.
But a big part of it comes from early life, right? Did we have somebody who encouraged us? You had your wife who said, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
And she, we don't, she might have been rolling her eyes, but to her, it was more important to encourage you. And I think that's the thing is throughout, your book and everything, it's, you got to have the right people around you, and we all know that. Get rid of those. Now, sometimes we need those naysayers because they're going to make us think, okay, well, but yeah, naysayers are different than toxic people. If they're toxic, they're gone. Even if they're family, right?
You have to.
Yeah.
You were the average of the five people you
Mm-hmm.
spend time with.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And it's just but it is about dreaming. It's about saying, okay, I can do this. And maybe it is, you're just going to make it a hobby. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, it's and what I love about your book is, it's you got to take those risks. And it really very much is why not? You
Right.
know?
Why not? Why not me? What's the worst that can happen?
Mm-hmm.
You only live once.
Right.
There's so
Mm-hmm.
many little one-liners,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think at the end of the day, you owe it to
Mm-hmm.
yourself to get to a point in your life where you look
Mm-hmm.
back and you don't have regrets
Mm-hmm. Right.
because that's all we're really
Mm-hmm.
talking
Right. Yeah. Do
is
you want your headstone to say, I wish I would have? Right.
right. I almost did something cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
I chickened out.
Mm-hmm. Right. And like we said, sometimes you got to have some wisdom there. I always marvel at the, I'm going to show my age here on this. The people who had pet rocks and made millions off of selling pet. Who would think that somebody, and we did. We were silly people. We bought these stupid pet rocks. And there are things like that all the time where it's like, really. And so if somebody can sell a rock, whatever you're thinking about has got to be better than that.
I tell people that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, there is so much dumb stuff
that's successful.
And you just don't know.
Right.
So go for it.
Right. So, oh my gosh, Greg, we're almost at the top of the hour, and this has been so much fun. We will have a link to the book and a link to your website. But for people who are saying, I need to work with you, how do they find you, and what are the services that you provide?
GregoryVetter.com and a bunch of different stuff. So I do a lot of coaching. I do some mentoring.
You mentioned your retreat.
Yep. Leadership retreats. I sit on some boards. And so a lot of people just read the book, want insight, want counsel, want advice, want my 2 cents. And they either reach out to me on social media or through the website. And that's how it goes.
I love it. And I can't wait to hear what's next, because you really are, just, okay, what's next, right? Like we said, you're going up those steps. Now you're ready. What's the next step? And so it's going to be fun to keep in touch with you. But until then, until we have you on to talk about your bazillion-dollar business, right? Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave with everyone?
Just trust your gut. I think if I could summarize everything into what went right and what went wrong, it was either I was trusting my gut or I wasn't. And if you're looking for an answer, you have the answers. You're just probably too scared to say them out loud. And that's what I would leave people with.
I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having so much fun talking with Gregory Vetter. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.